Hello, friends. This is going to be a first for Salem to do a virtual experience. But this week you'll hear from several of us that will be leading online devotions so that even though we can't be in the same space physically, spiritually, we can share some time together and focus our hearts in on what God is doing in our lives so that this week, even though the situations of the world don't allow us to be in the same place, we can be in the same place in our hearts and use this time that this week isn't wasted, but we can focus in the best way that we know how. So let's begin this morning looking at 1 John chapter 4, verses 7 through 11. And it says, "Beloved, let us love one another. For love is of God, and everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. He who does not love does not know God, for God is love. In this the love of God was manifested toward us, that God has sent his only begotten Son into the world, that we might live through him. In this is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the propitiation for our sins. Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another." Now, these verses are really important in my own life, but they're also important to what we're seeing right now in our world. As I think about a year without Salem, I know that one of the things that I miss most is having a week in my year of peace. All of us that have grown up at Salem or have time that in memories we've built there, we have a shared sense of what peace looks like. We know that the word Salem means peace. And looking back in my life, I can just recollect so many memories where I experienced peace. Now we know, and don't worry, I'm not going to go down a laundry list of things we've done, but especially for those of us who were kids together at Salem, we know that time at Salem was not always peaceful. We had plenty of arguments, we had plenty of confrontations, there was plenty of bickering, and somebody might have even gotten a punch in the nose every now and then. But our time at Salem was centered, even though there was some conflict, it was centered in love. And my grandmother would always say, "I'm going to straighten y'all out." And somebody would come along, if it was her or someone else, and would walk us through fixing the problem. And I realized that I could go anywhere, to any cabin, to the hotel, to the tabernacle, anywhere. And there was someone there that loved me and would show me the way of love. It didn't mean there wasn't any conflict. It didn't mean everything was perfect. But it meant there was this mass group of people that were committed to this idea of love. So in my child mind and in the eyes that I was looking in the world through at that time, that was an idea of this sense of what it meant to be loved in a community that was a foundation for my life. Now fast forward my life to when I was in college. And I was able to spend one summer studying at the King Center in Atlanta. And I was able to learn what nonviolence philosophies looked like. And I began to understand then that the goal of a life committed to nonviolence is this idea of beloved community. It's the end goal. Beloved community does not mean the absence of conflict. Beloved community means there's a mass group of people committed to this one concept of love. Now, the people who were teaching me about beloved community back then had marched in the civil rights movement. And many of them would hold up an arm and show me scars. These were scars that were caused by dogs that were released on them and water hoses that were turned on them. And these were physical scars that reminded them of hate from a time in their life. And they said, even in those situations that were full of so much pain, they still focused in on that idea of beloved community. An end goal where there's not a winner and a loser. An end goal where we share together in a place of love where everyone is a winner, because every reconciliation, every redemption, every step towards God is a time of healing that brings that idea of beloved community. Now we know that beloved community can only happen with that love that comes from God. It's called agape love. It's bigger than love that we can produce on our own. Agape love is when the very love of God is working in us and working through us. Dr. King said that this kind of a beloved community is only possible through agape love. It's the love of God operating in the human heart. It is love seeking to persevere, preserve, and create community. I'm blessed to say in my life I've experienced little taste of beloved community. Whether it was in a church fellowship or on a college campus or places that I've worked or with groups of friends, I've tasted it. I know I have experienced the agape love of God through people. Many of those people are watching this video right now. So since we don't have Salem this week where we're physically together, I want to challenge you to think about that idea of peace, that idea of agape love, and think, okay, we still have a mass group of people committed to love. What happens if we go forth where we are, wherever you are now, and we walk out in that kind of love? We ask God, will you work through me? I want to open myself up for your love to flow through me so that the world can know what that kind of love looks like. Our world's broken. We know that. We're broken. And the only thing that will bring healing is that agape love of Christ. So, how can you love your world today? How can you love your neighbors today? How can you love your broken community today with that agape love of Christ? What happens when the world knows that you love them? It doesn't mean that you're agreeing. It doesn't mean that we're going to not have any conflicts and not have any issues. What happens when the world knows that this mass group of people is committed to the agape love of Christ? I return to 1 John chapter 4, verse 7 through 11. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. He who does not love does not know God, for God is love. In this, the love of God was manifested toward us, that God has sent his only begotten Son into the world, that we might live through him. In this is love, not that we love God, but that he loved us, and sent his Son to be the propitiation for our sins. Beloved, those are the people in that beloved community. If God so loved us, we also ought to love one another.